Welcome to Bedtime Science. Tonight we explore the quiet green pharmacies hidden beneath the canopy of the Amazon rainforest, where for thousands of years, people have learned the names and natures of plants the way you might learn the faces of neighbors on your street. Before we begin our journey, did you know that the Matsés people of the Peru-Brazil border use the secretion of a giant tree frog as a hunting medicine, applied through small burns on the skin? Or that the Shipibo people of the Ucayali River identify individual plants not by Latin names, but by the specific geometric patterns each plant spirit is said to sing into the world? Or that a single hectare of Amazonian rainforest may contain more plant species than the entire British Isles, and that indigenous healers can often name and describe the medicinal properties of several hundred of them from memory. Tonight, we will gently explore 100 quiet facts about the plant rituals of the Amazon basin. We will learn about the specific plants known as plantas maestras, or teacher plants, and the strict diets that accompany them. We will learn about the ancient protocols surrounding sacred snuff, frog medicine, and forest brews. And we will sit with the biological mechanisms that modern pharmacology is only now beginning to measure and describe. Before we begin, if you find comfort here tonight, please consider subscribing to join our quiet community. Or, if you are still awake, leave a soft comment below about which corner of the natural world we should visit next. Now let's begin. Fact 1. The Amazon basin holds roughly 40,000 known plant species. About 30,000 of those grow nowhere else on the planet. If you placed every native plant of the British Isles, all 1,468 species, side by side, they would fill only a tiny fraction of a single Amazonian river drainage. The scale is hard to picture. Your mind reaches for a comparison and finds nothing adequate. Fact 2. At Yasuni National Park in eastern Ecuador, researchers have counted upwards of 655 tree species within a single hectare of lowland forest. That's more tree species in one patch of ground than you'd find native to the entire continental United States and Canada combined. A hectare of British woodland, by contrast, might contain fewer than 15. The density of botanical variety in the western Amazon exceeds anything else documented on Earth. Fact 3. Yasuni holds 3 world records for woody plant diversity, measured by standard ecological indices across different plot sizes. The 50-hectare forest dynamics plot there has been documented as the richest large-scale tropical forest sample anywhere. A comparable Panamanian plot supports 168 tree species per hectare. Yasuni supports more than 3 times that. These aren't estimates or projections. They're direct counts. Fact 4. Within this density of plant life, indigenous peoples of the Amazon have developed a medical tradition built entirely on direct observation, passed from one generation to the next through spoken word and hands-on apprenticeship. The healer, known in many Amazonian traditions as a curandero, functions as a living botanical encyclopedia. Training to become one may take 10 to 20 years of disciplined plant diets, isolation in the forest, and mentorship under an elder healer who already carries the knowledge. Fact 5. In the healing traditions of Peruvian and Brazilian Amazonia, a special category of plants exists. They're called plantas maestras, teacher plants, or sometimes plantas de poder, power plants. These are species considered capable of transmitting knowledge, healing, and vision directly to a practitioner who enters into a disciplined relationship with them. A 2022 study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology described the methodology for establishing this relationship as a multi-purpose method for making use of medicinal plants. Fact 6. That methodology is called the Dieta. It's a protocol that has been practiced for at least several thousand years. The practitioner enters the jungle or a quiet, isolated space for a minimum of 8 days, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. During that time, they consume the designated teacher plant daily, eat only bland foods like plantain and rice and fish, and abstain from salt, sugar, pork, alcohol, and sexual activity. They observe long periods of silence and solitude. The restrictions aren't arbitrary. Salt, for instance, inhibits the uptake of alkaloids across mucous membranes. Pork and alcohol are both relevant to the monoamine oxidase system. Fact 7. The list of recognized teacher plants varies by tradition and lineage, but commonly includes ayahuasca, tobacco, Bobinsana, Ajo Sacha, Kairiksanango, Chuchuhiwasi, Marosa, Noya Rao, Camelonga, and Mucura. Each plant is understood to have a distinct spirit, personality, and domain of teaching. Some are considered gentle. Others demand more from the practitioner. Fact 8. Ethnobotanist Richard Evans Schultz, widely considered the founder of modern Amazonian ethnobotany, began working from Harvard in the 1940s. He estimated that indigenous Amazonian healers carried knowledge of several hundred medicinal plants from memory. They distinguished these plants not only by appearance but by smell, texture, growth pattern, seasonal behavior, and ecological relationship to neighboring species. This represented, Schultz argued, a database of biological information accumulated through at least 10,000 years of human presence in the Amazonian biome. No single Western pharmacological database approaches that density of practical, empirically verified plant knowledge. Fact 9. In 2021, researchers at the University of Zurich published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, examining how medicinal plant knowledge is distributed across indigenous languages in the Amazon, New Guinea, and North America. Their finding was stark. Over 75% of all 12,495 documented medicinal plant uses across these regions are linguistically unique. That means they exist in only one language. In the northwestern Amazon specifically, 91% of medicinal plant knowledge is encoded in a single language. Let that sit for a moment, 91%. Fact 10. The practical consequence is that when an Amazonian language dies, it doesn't merely lose its words, it loses its pharmacopoeia. Study co-author Rodrigo Camaralaret put it this way: every time an indigenous language dies, it's like a library is burning, but we don't see it because it's silent. A separate long-term study with the Tsimin people of Bolivia found that adults in that community were losing approximately 3% of their plant medicinal knowledge per year. That rate of erosion far exceeds estimated rates of biodiversity loss. Fact 11. The United Nations lists all indigenous languages of the Western Amazon as endangered. Linguists estimate that of the roughly 7,000 languages spoken globally, about half will cease to be spoken by the year 2100. In the Amazon, where the median indigenous community may contain only several hundred fluent speakers, language death and ecological knowledge loss are branches of the same process. Fact 12. This knowledge didn't come from textbooks. Traditional Amazonian healers don't describe learning medicine the way a Western medical student would. The knowledge of which plant treats which ailment, in which preparation, at which dose, for which patient. All of it is transmitted through years of Dieta practice, apprenticeship with a senior healer, and the visions experienced during ceremonies. The healer's knowledge base is embodied, not archived, stored in a trained nervous system, and in the web of relationships between the healer, the plants, and the songs that bind them. These first 12 facts describe the scale of botanical knowledge held in the Amazon. The next group looks at one of the most well-known teacher plants in these traditions, and at the precise molecular choreography that makes it work. Fact 13. Ayahuasca is prepared by combining two distinct plant sources, the Banisteriopsis caapi vine and the leaves of Psychotria viridis. Each plant contributes a chemically different set of molecules. The interaction between them depends on a precise molecular sequence that must occur inside the human digestive system in the correct order. Neither plant, consumed alone, produces the full effect. The medicine lives in the combination. Fact 14. Psychotria viridis, known in Shipibo as chacruna, contains N-endimethyltryptamine in its leaves at concentrations of about 0.1 to 0.66% dry weight. DMT is a tryptamine, structurally related to the neurotransmitter serotonin, and a potent psychoactive compound. But here's the thing. When you swallow DMT orally without any accompanying preparation, it's almost entirely inactive. The explanation lies in a single enzyme. Fact 15. Monoamine oxidase A is an enzyme found in the mitochondrial membranes of cells lining the gastrointestinal tract, liver, and brain. Its job is to break down biogenic amines, including serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and DMT, through oxidative deamination. When DMT arrives in the small intestine after being swallowed, the MAOA enzymes in the gut wall dismantle it within minutes. They convert it primarily into indole-3 acetic acid before any meaningful amount reaches the bloodstream. In a 24-hour urine analysis following ayahuasca administration, researchers found that only 1% of ingested DMT was recovered unchanged. 55% appeared as indole-3 acetic acid. 12% appeared as DMT N oxide. The gut destroys DMT efficiently and rapidly. Fact 16. The Banisteriopsis caapi vine solves this problem. It provides molecules that temporarily disable MAOA. The active compounds are beta-carboline alkaloids, harmine, harmaline, and tetrahydroharmine. Researchers measured mean concentrations across 159 samples of the vine. Harmine came in at 4.79 milligrams per gram, harmaline at 0.451, tetrahydroharmine at 2.18. Total average beta-carboline content was 7.4 milligrams per gram. Variability between samples was high, with relative standard deviations ranging from 78 to 170%. No two vines are the same. Fact 17. Harmine is the most abundant of the three. It's a reversible inhibitor of monoamine oxidase A, meaning it temporarily blocks the active site of the enzyme without permanently destroying it. Unlike the irreversible MAO inhibitors used in older antidepressant medications, which require strict dietary restrictions for weeks, the inhibition from harmine is transient and selective. It blocks MAO-A but doesn't touch MAO-B. The blockade lifts. The enzyme recovers. Fact 18. When the brew is swallowed, the beta-carbolines reach the small intestine first. Liquids contact the gut wall faster than the DMT embedded in leaf particles. The harmine, harmaline, and tetrahydroharmine occupy and block the MAOA enzymes in the gut wall and liver. Then, moments later, when DMT arrives at the same intestinal surface, the enzymes that would normally destroy it are already occupied. The DMT survives. It enters the portal circulation. It passes through the liver. It reaches the bloodstream. And then it reaches the brain. Fact 19. DMT crosses the blood-brain barrier easily because of its lipophilic character and its structural resemblance to serotonin. Inside the brain, it acts as a potent agonist at the 5-HT2A serotonin receptor, which is understood to be the primary molecular trigger for the characteristic visual and perceptual effects of the ayahuasca experience. It also interacts with 5-HT1A, 5-HT2C, sigma-1 receptors, and trace amine-associated receptors. No single receptor interaction fully explains the complete experience. Researchers describe an entourage effect, where multiple simultaneous molecular actions shape what happens. Fact 20. The 5-HT2A receptor, when activated by DMT, disrupts what neuroscientists call the default mode network. That's a set of brain regions active during self-referential thinking, autobiographical memory, and the maintenance of a stable sense of self. PET and fMRI studies show that psychedelic-induced activation of this receptor decreases default mode network activity while simultaneously increasing connectivity between brain regions that don't normally communicate. Walls between rooms come down. Information that was compartmentalized begins to mix. Fact 21. Tetrahydroharmine, the third major beta-carboline in the vine, adds another pharmacological layer beyond MAO inhibition. It's a weak serotonin reuptake inhibitor, meaning it slightly prolongs the time serotonin remains active in the synaptic gap between neurons. This serotonergic amplification may contribute to the emotional openness and mood changes reported during and after ceremonies. Its concentrations show the highest variability of any beta-carboline in the vine, relative standard deviation of 170%, partly because harmine can be chemically reduced to harmaline, which can then be reduced to tetrahydroharmine during the prolonged boiling of brew preparation. The chemistry changes with cooking. The brew isn't a fixed substance. Heat and time shape it. Fact 22. In a 2024 pharmacokinetic study, researchers documented a carryover effect when 2 sequential ayahuasca doses were given 4 hours apart. Beta-carboline residues from the first dose were still present in the bloodstream when the second arrived, producing approximately 25% higher peak DMT plasma concentrations after the second cup compared to the first. Experienced healers who drink multiple cups in a single ceremony aren't simply adding to a linear dose. They're compounding MAO inhibition in a time-dependent manner. Their traditions have accounted for this long before any plasma assay existed. Fact 23. DMT isn't exclusively a molecule imported from tropical plants. It's present in trace amounts in the human brain, human cerebrospinal fluid, and plasma. The enzyme required to synthesize it, indolthylamine N-methyltransferase, has been confirmed present in human cerebral cortex, choroid plexus, and pineal gland. In 2019, researchers at the University of Michigan detected elevated DMT concentrations in rat visual cortex following experimentally induced cardiac arrest, suggesting that endogenous DMT production may increase during extreme physiological stress. The biological function of endogenous DMT in humans remains unknown. Fact 24. Traditional ayahuasca brewing involves extended boiling, sometimes 12 hours or more, which alters the chemical profile of the resulting liquid in ways not captured by analyzing dry plant material. The prolonged heat converts some harmine to tetrahydroharmine through a reduction reaction, which explains the unusually high tetrahydroharmine ratios found in prepared brews compared to raw vine. Different Amazonian traditions use different preparation methods, different ratios of vine to leaf, sometimes entirely different admixture plants. The resulting brews have substantially different alkaloid profiles. Every healer's brew is, in some real sense, a personal formulation. Fact 25. The question of whether Psychotria viridis and Banisteriopsis caapi were originally discovered in combination by accident or by design is one that ethnobotany can't fully answer. The Amazon basin contains approximately 80,000 plant species. The probability of randomly selecting these two, combining them in the correct preparation, and discovering their pharmacological cooperation has been cited as evidence for a deep ecological knowledge system, whose sophistication Western science is only beginning to appreciate. Ayahuasca is perhaps the most widely discussed of the Amazonian plant medicines, but the Amazon holds many other teacher plants, each with its own character and purpose. The next group of facts enters that wider world. Fact 26. Bobinsana, Calliandra angustifolia, belongs to the legume family. It's a perennial shrub or small tree, growing 4 to 6 meters tall. It grows almost exclusively alongside rivers and streams, and it's particularly abundant along the banks of the Huallaga and Mayo rivers in eastern Peru. It produces vivid pink powder puff-like flowers. In Shipibo and other Amazonian traditions, Bobinsana is associated with emotional healing, lucid dreaming, and the opening of the heart center. Fact 27. The phytochemical profile of Bobinsana is not fully characterized, a gap that reflects the broader underfunding of Amazonian plant research. Documented constituents include harmala alkaloids, amino acids, including pipecolic acid at approximately 0.25% in leaf tissue, cyanogenic glycosides, flavonoids, tannins, saponins, and sterols. The plant demonstrates COX-1 inhibitory activity, a mechanism shared with common anti-inflammatory drugs, which provides a plausible basis for its traditionally documented anti-arthritic properties. Fact 28. The harmala alkaloids in Bobinsana are particularly interesting because they represent a low-potency MAOA inhibiting component, structurally related to the harmine and harmaline found in the ayahuasca vine. This means Bobinsana, like the vine, may subtly modulate monoamine metabolism during a dieta. It could alter serotonin and tryptamine dynamics in the practitioner's nervous system over extended periods. It's often used as a dieta plant preceding or accompanying ayahuasca work. A gentle doorway before a larger room. Fact 29. Noya rao is the most celebrated and least accessible of all Shipibo teacher plants. The Shipibo name translates literally as flying medicine or flying plant spirit. Noya means flying. Rao means plant spirit. The tree is described as emitting a faint luminescence visible to those who have established a relationship with it through Dieta practice, a quality that has earned it the name Tree of Light. Among Shipibo curanderos, it's considered the highest and most refined teacher plant in existence. Knowledge of its lineage is held within specific shamanic families, particularly the Mahua family. Fact 30. From a Western botanical standpoint, Noya Rao presents a genuine classification problem. No confirmed Latin binomial exists for the tree. Some researchers have suggested it may be an undescribed species. Others speculate it could be a known species perceived differently under the influence of extended plant dietas. A third perspective holds that Noya Rao refers not to a single botanical taxon, but to a spiritual state, an enlightened condition reached by a specific tree, similar to how the concept of a Buddha describes a person who has reached a particular awareness rather than a fixed identity. The tree is described as extremely rare. Only a handful of known living individuals have been identified. Fact 31. Marosa, Phaphia irsinoides, belongs to the family Amaranthaceae and was first formally described by Sprengel in 1827. It's a perennial herb found in moist lowland forests, growing in shaded areas near streams and rivers. Its range extends through Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Mexico, and parts of the Caribbean. It's botanically related to Phaphia paniculata, the plant commonly marketed as Brazilian ginseng. Fact 32. In Amazonian healing practice, Marosa is described as possessing a watery, feminine energy. Healers revere it for its connection to river spirits. Medicinally, Phaphia irsinoides is documented as treating fever, skin diseases, and digestive disorders. Its broader family relative, Phaphia paniculata, contains ecdysterone, a phytosteroid with anabolic properties, 19 amino acids, minerals, and phaphicides. While Marosa hasn't been chemically characterized to the same degree, the phytochemical family relationship suggests shared compound classes. The science is incomplete. The traditional use is centuries old. Fact 33. Tobacco in the Amazonian context isn't the same plant as the commercial cigarette product. The primary species used in Amazonian healing is Nicotiana rustica, a wild tobacco distinct from the commercially cultivated Nicotiana tabacum. Nicotiana rustica contains substantially higher nicotine concentrations, 7 to 8% or more of dry leaf weight in some samples, compared to 1.5 to 3.5% in most commercial blends. This is a pharmacologically potent substance, nothing like the mild recreational product sold on convenience store shelves. Fact 34. In the Peruvian Amazon, the word for healer in multiple indigenous languages derives etymologically from the word for tobacco. In Uruguay, the healer Corianchata literally translates as he who eats tobacco. In Ashaninka, the healer Sheripyri means the one intoxicated by tobacco. This linguistic evidence suggests tobacco predates ayahuasca as the primary healing substance in some Amazonian traditions, and that its role as a teacher plant is at least as old. Fact 35. The Dieta system functions as both a biochemical sensitization protocol and a cognitive restructuring program. Published clinical research by Berlovitz and colleagues in 2022 and 2023 described it as a process through which the interplay of dietary conditions and plants ingested sensitizes the dieter to receive healing, strength, guidance, and knowledge. The restrictions, no salt, sugar, fermented foods, fatty meats, may modulate serotonin and MAOA activity in ways that make the practitioner's neurotransmitter system more responsive to the subtle alkaloid doses used outside of full ceremony. 8 days of bland food, silence, and solitude, and then the plant begins to teach. These quiet teacher plants are consumed in solitude and stillness, deep in the forest or at the river's edge. The next group of facts examines a very different kind of medicine, one administered through the nose. Fact 36. Rapé, pronounced Rapé, is the sacred Amazonian snuff. It's prepared from finely ground Nicotiana rustica combined with medicinal plant ashes, most commonly from the bark of the tsunu tree, Platysiamus rignellii. The resulting powder is blown forcefully into each nostril using a V-shaped self-administration pipe called a curripe, or a long ceremonial pipe called a tepi when administered by a healer to another person. The force and rhythm of the blow carry meaning. The intense nicotine delivery produces immediate grounding and mental focus. Fact 37. Among the Yawanawa people, Rapé, called Ruma in their tradition, is described as a central shamanic medicine of vital importance in the formation of the Pajé, or shaman. It isn't simply a tool. It's a living entity with a role in the spiritual formation of those who lead ceremonies. Fact 38. A Yawanawa origin myth tells that Rapé, Ayahuasca, and chili emerged from the dismembered body of a primordial being called Ruwa. This framing places the medicine as a gift from the spirit world, not a human invention. The origin story binds the substances together in a single narrative of sacrifice and renewal. Fact 39. For the Huni-Kewin, also known as the Kaxinawa, Rapé is tightly linked to their broader sacred plant complex alongside ayahuasca. It's central to ritual, healing, and ceremonial culture. The preparation methods, the specific plant ashes used, the prayers spoken during preparation. These all vary between communities and are considered proprietary knowledge. Fact 40. The tradition of ritual snuff in Amazonia extends beyond tobacco to several tree species whose seeds contain powerful tryptamine alkaloids. Anadenanthera colubrina, the cebol or vilca tree of the Andes and western Amazon, produces seeds containing bufotenine at 2.7 to 12.4% of seed weight, along with 5-MeO-DMT at 0.04 to 0.16%, and DMT. Archaeological evidence of vilca use, found in pipes, snuffing trays, and leather bags, has been dated back approximately 4,000 years. That makes it one of the oldest documented psychoactive practices in the Americas. Fact 41. Application protocols for Rapé vary between peoples, but the core mechanics are shared. The powder is blown into each nostril through a pipe. When administered by another person using a tepi, the healer controls the force, the angle, the rhythm. This isn't casual. The blow itself is considered part of the medicine. A gentle blow and a strong blow produce different effects. The healer reads the recipient and adjusts. Fact 42. The bitterness of ayahuasca connects to something deep in the human nervous system. The brew is among the most bitter substances a person can voluntarily consume. That bitterness isn't incidental. It's the first signal the body sends to the brain that something unusual has been swallowed. Fact 43. The human genome encodes approximately 25 distinct TAS2R receptors, each shaped to detect a different chemical profile of bitterness. Unlike sweet or umami receptors, which work in pairs, each TAS2R functions alone as a solitary G protein-coupled receptor. Together, these 25 receptors give the human palate the ability to detect thousands of structurally different bitter compounds. 25 locks, thousands of keys. Fact 44. When a bitter molecule, such as the beta-carboline alkaloids found in the ayahuasca vine, makes contact with a TAS2R receptor on the tongue, a cascading molecular event begins. The receptor changes shape. A protein called G-alpha-gusjuicin breaks free and triggers the release of calcium inside the cell. The cell membrane shifts its electrical charge. At the end of this chain, a molecule of ATP is released, a signal that travels to the brain in a fraction of a second. Fact 45. Columbia University neuroscientist Charles Zucker has spent more than 25 years decoding how that signal reaches the brain and what the brain does with it. His foundational discovery: each taste quality maps to a dedicated, anatomically separate zone of the gustatory cortex. The sweet zone and the bitter zone sit approximately 2 millimeters apart in the mouse brain. 2 millimeters. That's the distance between pleasure and revulsion in the architecture of the cortex. Fact 46. In a landmark 2015 experiment published in Nature, Zucker and his colleague Nicholas Ryba used optogenetics, a technique that allows neurons to be switched on with laser light, to directly stimulate the bitter cortical field in mice drinking plain water. The mice began pawing at their mouths. They were trying to scrub away a foul taste that existed nowhere but in their own brains. Taste, the way you and I think of it, is ultimately in the brain, Zucker concluded. Fact 47. This discovery reveals something deep about the bitterness of ayahuasca. The aversion isn't merely chemical, it's neurological. The bitter cortex doesn't simply register a flavor, it generates an experience of revulsion. Activating it produces rejection behaviors that are wired into the nervous system before any learning occurs. The decision to overcome that reflex and drink the brew represents a deliberate override of one of the oldest protective systems in the mammalian brain. Fact 48. Zucker's research also demonstrated that the sweet and bitter systems are in active competition. Strong activation of the sweet cortical field can partially suppress the aversive response to a bitter substance applied at the same time. This means that traditional preparation methods for ayahuasca, which sometimes include adding slightly sweet admixture plants, may not be purely cultural. They could be a practical, empirically discovered way of modulating the brain's rejection signal. A technique refined over centuries, without any knowledge of cortical mapping. Fact 49. Beyond the cortex, bitter taste signals drive reflexes in the brainstem itself, activating avoidance responses that precede conscious awareness. Zucker's broader research program has extended to the gut-brain axis, showing that signals from the gut travel via the vagus nerve to reward circuits deep in the brain. The bitter reflex, operating in this architecture, was never designed to be defeated. For thousands of years, Amazonian healers have defeated it anyway. Fact 50. Humans are from birth programmed to reject bitter substances. The evolutionary logic is straightforward. Most toxic alkaloids produced by plants as chemical defenses are bitter. The TAS2R system functions as a biological toxin screen, and here's where it gets interesting. Many of the most pharmacologically active compounds in Amazonian plant medicine, including the beta-carbolines of Banisteriopsis caapi and the alkaloids of Nicotiana rustica, are detected by this exact system. The body says danger. The healer says medicine. Fact 51. Zucker's early work, published in the journal Cell in the year 2000, was among the first to identify the gene family encoding bitter taste receptors in humans and rodents. He framed it as a beginning. We now have the means to really start to investigate how taste works, not just in the tongue, but also what happens in the brain. That investigation continues. Fact 52. Ayahuasca has demonstrated clinically meaningful effects in multiple human studies for treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and addiction. A 2025 review in CNS Spectrums documented its safety profile and therapeutic applications. The interaction between DMT and the beta-carbolines remains the most studied aspect of its pharmacology. A complete mechanistic account of its therapeutic action is not yet established. Fact 53. The brew contains additional active compounds beyond DMT and beta-carbolines. A 2022 study in ACS Omega and a 2024 review in Neuropsychopharmacology both noted that the chemical diversity in the ayahuasca plant matrix predicts an entourage effect, where minor constituents modulate the overall experience in ways that haven't been investigated. These minor compounds include harmol, harmalol, harmalinic acid, and various derivatives. The brew isn't two molecules, it's a chemical ecosystem. Fact 54. The sigma-1 receptor, one of the targets at which DMT acts in the brain, is a unique protein associated with neuroprotection, neuroplasticity, and the regulation of neuroinflammation. Unlike most neurotransmitter receptors, sigma-1 receptors sit not on the cell surface, but on the endoplasmic reticulum inside neurons, the membrane system that mediates protein folding, calcium signaling, and cellular stress responses. DMT's activity at these receptors may contribute to the neuroplastic and anti-inflammatory effects observed in clinical ayahuasca research. Fact 55. The human body produces DMT endogenously in trace amounts. The enzyme required to make it has been confirmed present in human brain tissue, including the cerebral cortex and pineal gland. In 2019, University of Michigan researchers published findings showing that DMT concentrations rose markedly in the rat visual cortex following experimentally induced cardiac arrest. Whether near-death experiences, certain deep meditation states, or the most profound phases of dream activity involve endogenous DMT release remains an open scientific question. The molecule is already inside you. Its purpose there is still unknown. Rapé enters the body through the breath. Ayahuasca enters through the gut. The next medicine we examine enters through the skin itself. Fact 56. Philomjusa bicolor, the giant monkey frog of the northwestern Amazon, is a large arboreal frog, predominantly green with white-spotted flanks. It inhabits the rainforest canopy along rivers in Peru, Brazil, Colombia, and Bolivia. The frog isn't venomous in the traditional sense. It doesn't inject its secretions through a bite. Instead, its skin glands produce a complex biochemical mixture the animal uses as a defensive barrier against predators. The Matsés people learned long ago to collect that mixture and use it for something very different. Fact 57. In 1985, Italian pharmacologist Vittorio Erspamer, the same researcher who had previously discovered serotonin, published a paper in the journal Peptides describing the skin of Philomjusa frogs as a formidable factory and storehouse of a variety of active peptides. That single sentence became the defining frame for all subsequent Kambo research. Erspamer identified 7 peptide families present in the secretion: the carulines, the bradykinins, the tachykinins, the bomicins, sovagin, the dermorphins, and the tryptophylins. 7 families, each one acting on a different part of the human body. Fact 58. Phylocaroline, present in the highest concentration in the secretion, acts on gastrointestinal smooth muscle. It stimulates intestinal movement, bile flow, pancreatic secretion, and gastric acid production. It's structurally related to cholecystokinin, a hormone your gut already makes. Its affinity for cholecystokinin receptors is of the same order of magnitude as the hormone itself. When Kambo enters the body through a burn wound, this peptide is most responsible for the intense wave of nausea that characterizes the first minutes. Fact 59. Phylomjusin belongs to the tachykinin family, the same broad family as substance P, a neuropeptide involved in pain transmission and mood regulation. Phylomjusin excites neurons, contracts smooth muscles, and acts as both a vasodilator and a secretagogue, meaning it stimulates the release of digestive enzymes. This dual action on the nervous system and smooth muscle helps explain the facial flushing and swelling seen shortly after Kambo application. Fact 60. Phylokinin belongs to the bradykinin family. It targets bradykinin receptors in arterial smooth muscle, inducing vasodilation and a rapid drop in blood pressure. Combined with phylocaroline's gut stimulation, this produces what clinicians sometimes describe as a pharmacological cascade. Blood pressure drops, the face swells, the heart races. These are the anatomical results of multiple peptides acting on different vascular and muscular targets at once. Fact 61. Sauvagin, named after the French word for wild, is a 40 amino acid peptide that stimulates the release of ACTH from the pituitary gland. This triggers an acute stress response through the adrenal cortex. Some researchers have suggested that this brief, intense adrenal activation may contribute to the reported feelings of physical vigor and sharpened alertness that many Matsés hunters describe in the hours after Kambo. A short chemical storm, followed by a long and steady clearing. Fact 62. Dermorphins are a family of peptide antibiotics found in the skin secretions of Phylomjusa species. In laboratory settings, they've demonstrated broad-spectrum antimicrobial activity against bacteria, fungi, and protozoa, including Leishmania species, a parasitic pathogen common in Amazonian river environments. The presence of these antimicrobial peptides in Kambo has drawn pharmaceutical interest, though no clinical drug has yet been developed from them. Fact 63. Perhaps the most pharmacologically remarkable compound in the frog secretion is Dermorphin, a peptide only 7 amino acids long. Dermorphin is approximately 30 to 40 times more potent than morphine at the mu-opioid receptor. When administered directly to the spinal cord, it has been measured at 3,000 to 5,000 times more potent than morphine in certain pain models. This extraordinary potency arises in part from an unusual molecular feature. The second amino acid in the chain is a D-amino acid rather than the L-amino acids that make up virtually all mammalian proteins. Worth pausing on. Fact 64. D-amino acids don't appear in the human genetic code. Human ribosomes build proteins exclusively from L-amino acids. D-amino acids of the kind found in Dermorphin are typically produced only by bacteria, certain amphibians, and mollusks. In Phylomjusa bicolor, this unusual D-alanine residue is introduced by a specialized enzyme after the peptide has already been built by the ribosome, a post-translational modification. The result is a molecule that binds to the human mu-opioid receptor, with an affinity that vastly exceeds any opioid the human body makes for itself. Fact 65. The discovery of Dermorphin's D-Amino acid structure in the early 1980s was scientifically controversial. D-amino acid-containing peptides were considered essentially impossible in vertebrate biology at the time. The prevailing understanding held that only bacteria and certain fungi used D-amino acids. The confirmation that a vertebrate, a tree frog, produces a D-amino acid peptide as a major skin secretion fundamentally expanded what biochemists believed was possible in complex animal tissues. Fact 66. Deltorphin, also present in the frog's secretion, acts preferentially at the delta opioid receptor, which is associated with mood regulation, anxiety modulation, and neuroprotection. The simultaneous activation of both mu and delta opioid pathways by the Kambo secretion creates a neurochemical interaction that is distinct from any single synthetic opioid drug. Two keys turning in two different locks at the same moment. Fact 67. The standard Kambo application involves burning small dots, called gates, into the skin using a smoldering vine or stick. A small amount of the dried frog secretion, rehydrated with saliva, is then applied directly onto the fresh wound. A single gate uses approximately 10 milligrams of secretion. A typical ceremony uses 3 to 5 gates. The burn wound bypasses the digestive system entirely, allowing the bioactive peptides to enter the lymphatic system and bloodstream through the skin. Fact 68. In a 1993 paper published in Toxicon, Erspamer analyzed dried phylum juice bicolor secretion used by the Matsés and quantified the concentration of each major peptide. He correlated each peptide with specific symptoms of the Kambo experience, documenting that the biological effects of the ceremony, increased stamina, suppressed hunger, altered alertness, could be mapped onto the pharmacological profile of individual compounds. Fact 69. A 2022 review paper by Thompson and Williams surveyed the existing research on these skin peptides and noted a critical gap. Virtually all published studies examine the effects of individual isolated peptides, but Kambo is administered as a complete, complex mixture. The interactions between phylocaroline, phylomjusin, phylloquinin, dermorphin, deltorphin, sovagin, dermapeptin, and the tryptophylins, all acting simultaneously on the same body, remain largely unmeasured. The whole has never been studied as a whole. Fact 70. In the traditional Matsés practice, Kambo is used primarily as a preparatory medicine for hunting, not as a ritual of spiritual exploration. The Matsés believe the secretion removes Panema, a concept roughly translatable as weakened hunting ability or bad luck. Matsés elders regard Kambo as part of their intellectual and spiritual heritage. Deep teachings, songs, and contextual cosmology around the frog are intentionally withheld from outsiders. Administration isn't casual. The person applying Kambo must be an experienced hunter or ritual specialist who has undergone his own series of treatments. These frog medicines are tied to the specific rhythms of the forest. The next facts explore the broader relationship between Amazonian peoples and the living world around them. Fact 71. Icaros, the healing songs of Shipibo curanderos, are among the most precise transmission technologies in any oral tradition. An Icaro isn't composed in the ordinary sense. It's received, typically during years of Dieta practice, as a direct transmission from a plant spirit. Each Icaro belongs to a specific plant and encodes specific healing instructions. The Takiwasi Center for Rehabilitation Research in the Peruvian Amazon has documented that the Icaro embodies the knowledge of the shaman, constituting his curative patrimony, his working tool, and the inheritance of his apprentice. A song that is also a prescription, a melody that is also a map. Fact 72. The Shipibo visual art tradition, called Kene, is inseparable from the Icaro tradition. Kene means simply design. It's a system of geometric patterns applied to textiles, ceramics, body paint, and architectural surfaces. These grids, spirals, and wave forms are described by Shipibo artists and healers not as decorative choices, but as the visual form of Icaros made visible. Geometric representations of healing songs perceived during Ayahuasca ceremonies. The patterns are traditionally created by women. The songs are traditionally learned by male healers. Both are understood as expressions of the same underlying knowledge. Fact 73. Neuroscientists have identified that DMT and other 5-HT2A agonists predictably produce geometric visual patterns, spirals, grids, fractals, that correspond in structural character to Kene art. But the meaning of Kene within Shipibo culture isn't reducible to a neurological byproduct. The patterns are understood to encode the structure of reality itself. The interconnected web of life that includes forest, water, wind, fire, and the relationships between all living beings. The patterns aren't hallucinations. In the Shipibo view, they're the opposite. They're the truth beneath the surface of things. Fact 74. The mechanism by which sound influences physiology is neurological, not mystical. Sound waves at certain frequencies entrain brain oscillations, a phenomenon called neural entrainment. The voice of a skilled ceremonial singer can produce measurable changes in heart rate, respiratory rhythm, and the activity of the autonomic nervous system. In a ceremony setting where the listener is also under the influence of a pharmacologically active brew, the sensitivity of these neurological systems to auditory input may be substantially amplified. The song doesn't merely accompany the medicine. The song shapes the medicine's path through the body. Fact 75. Oral transmission of botanical knowledge across generations has been studied directly by ethnobotanists. A 2020 study in the Journal of Ethnobiology examined how ethnobotanical knowledge is encoded in the oral literature of the Weenhiek people of the Grand Chaco. The researchers found that oral stories contain precise, reproducible botanical and ecological information that functions as a mnemonic library. Knowledge accessed, refreshed, and transmitted without any written medium. Stories that contain instructions, songs that contain data. Fact 76. Indigenous healers who have undergone extensive Dieta practice describe the ability to remember the Icaro of a plant during ceremony, to hear it or receive it as though it already existed and was being retrieved rather than invented. This description is consistent with how trained musicians describe improvisation, accessing a vocabulary of patterns deeply internalized through practice, rather than generating them from scratch. The Icaro isn't created in the moment. It's found. It was always there, waiting for a nervous system trained well enough to receive it. Fact 77. The integration of sensory modalities, sound, vision, touch, that characterizes the Shipibo ceremony system has been described by anthropologists as a form of synesthesia built into the ritual architecture. Kene designs are sung. Songs are perceived as geometric forms. Plants are understood to have colors, temperatures, and textures. This cross-modal integration mirrors what psychedelic neuroscience describes as synesthetic perceptual states produced by 5-HT2A activation, a state in which the boundaries between sensory channels become permeable. You see the music, you hear the pattern, the senses stop being separate rooms. Fact 78. The pharmacological basis of Kambo, Ayahuasca, and Rapé was empirically mapped by Amazonian healers long before any of their constituent molecules had Western names. The observed effects, the specific timeline of nausea followed by clarity, the dose-response relationship of different numbers of burn gates, the dietary preparations that enhance or diminish the experience, represent thousands of years of controlled observation. The experimental method was different from what we practice in laboratories. The rigor was not. Fact 79. In traditional Matsés practice, the Kambo ceremony for hunters includes a specific timing protocol. The secretion is applied early in the morning before an expedition. The intense purging resolves within 30 to 60 minutes. What remains, according to Matsés' accounts, is a state of heightened physical acuity, suppressed hunger, and enhanced stamina persisting for several hours. The pharmacological explanation includes the post-purgative vasomotor rebound, the adrenal activation from sovagen, and the subthreshold opioid pain suppression from dermorphin and deltorphin still circulating in the blood. Fact 80. The Matsés name for the frog secretion in their own language translates roughly as hunting strength, a name that is functionally accurate as a pharmacological description. Western science assigned the molecule dermorphin its name in 1981, when Italian pharmacologist Marco Briccardo published a detailed characterization. In that paper, Briccardo demonstrated that dermorphin was about 40 times more potent than morphine at opioid receptors, and between 57 and 294 times more potent than various enkephalins. The Matsés had been working with this molecular reality for generations before that paper was printed. Fact 81. Subsequent research on the dermorphin peptide family, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 1992, identified multiple naturally occurring dermorphin-like variants in the skin of this single frog species. These variants showed differential preferences for two subtypes of the mu-opioid receptor, a high-affinity subtype associated with pain relief and a low-affinity subtype associated with catalepsy. The secretion can simultaneously activate distinct functional arms of the same receptor system, not a single key, a keyring. Fact 82. Philomjusa bicolor isn't the only Amazonian frog with pharmacologically active skin secretions. It's simply the best studied. The family Philomjusinae contains numerous species, each producing a distinct peptide profile. Comparative studies have identified dermapeptin antibiotics, active against bacteria, fungi, and parasites, that vary in sequence and potency across the genus. The canopy is a library of antimicrobial and neuroactive compounds, distributed across every species of tree frog living in it. Fact 83. A 2012 molecular cloning study by Koenig and colleagues, using tibial gland secretion from Philomjusa bicolor, identified novel peptide-encoding precursor sequences not previously known in this species. Even the most intensively studied Amazonian pharmacological source still has molecules that remain undescribed. The skin of a single frog species isn't yet fully mapped. Fact 84. The Dieta system creates a form of pharmacological literacy through embodied practice. A healer who has dieted with Bobinsana, Noya, and Ayahuasca across many years carries a personally mapped, experientially verified pharmacopoeia, a knowledge system of what each plant feels like from the inside, at different doses, in different seasons, combined with different intentions. This experiential database can't be captured by Western phytochemistry alone. It requires generations of practitioners willing to place themselves inside the experiment. Fact 85. Bobinsana is almost always found growing in or near moving water, at the edge of rivers, streams, and flooded forest floor. This ecological specificity isn't incidental to its traditional uses. Amazonian cosmological systems describe certain plants as belonging to particular elemental domains: water plants, forest plants, mountain plants. Bobinsana's association with water, emotion, dreams, and the feminine in Shipibo medicine reflects a system in which a plant's habitat and its healing domain are aspects of the same reality. Where it grows tells you what it treats. These relationships between people and plants have endured for millennia. The final facts consider what holds this knowledge in place and what threatens it. Fact 86. The Matsés people live along the Yaquarana River, in one of the most remote stretches of the western Amazon, at the Peru-Brazil border. Their language belongs to the Panema language family. In 2015, they completed what has been described as the first encyclopedia of indigenous knowledge written by Amazonian tribal shamans ever produced. Fact 87. The Matsés Traditional Medicine Encyclopedia was completed on May 16, 2015, after more than 2 years of intensive work. It was compiled through meetings held in the Matsés village of Puerto Alegre, one of the most remote settlements in the Peruvian Amazon, at the headwaters of a river-bordering territory that contains at least one group living in voluntary isolation. The process was coordinated by Icaros, a conservation organization, and led by Daniel Vela Calantes, High Chief of the Matsés people. Fact 88. The encyclopedia runs to over 500 pages. It was authored by 5 Matsés master shamans. Each entry includes how to recognize a disease by its symptoms, its traditional cause, which plants to use, how to prepare the medicine, alternative therapeutic options, and a photograph of the plant taken by the Matsés themselves. It represents the accumulated medicinal knowledge of an entire culture, mapped by its own most knowledgeable practitioners, in their own language for their own use. Fact 89. The encyclopedia was printed exclusively in the Matsés' native language, not in Spanish, not in English. No scientific names were used. No detailed botanical photographs were included that might allow outside identification of the plants. These protective measures were deliberate responses to a long history of bioprospecting in the Amazon, in which pharmaceutical companies and researchers extracted traditional knowledge, developed commercial products, and filed patents without compensation to the communities whose observations made those discoveries possible. Fact 90. Christopher Herndon, president of Icaros, described the encyclopedia as marking the first time shamans of an Amazonian tribe have created a full and complete transcription of their medicinal knowledge written in their own language and words. The completion was followed by an apprentices program, in which each elder shaman accompanies younger Matsés community members into the forest to learn the plants directly. Book and body, text and experience, both are needed. Fact 91. Many of the Matsés shamans who contributed to the Encyclopedia were elderly. Some had no apprentices. The project began, in part, because of a recognition that if these individuals died without transmitting their knowledge, it would vanish entirely. Not because it had been destroyed, but because no human nervous system remained that had absorbed it. The race to complete the encyclopedia before its authors passed was one that the Matsés narrowly won. Fact 92. The pharmacological characterization of Amazonian plant and animal medicines has almost exclusively been conducted by researchers based in European and North American institutions. Italian, American, British, Brazilian, Swiss researchers, working on compounds first identified through their traditional use by Amazonian communities. The communities whose generations of experimental practice made these discoveries possible have received no systematic benefit from the commercialization of that knowledge. The asymmetry is documented. It persists. Fact 93. The concept of Panema in Matsés culture, the state of weakened hunting ability that Kambo is used to treat, has no direct Western biomedical equivalent. But the pharmacological profile of Kambo includes opioid-mediated pain suppression, autonomic system activation, gastrointestinal purging, and acute stress hormone release. If Panema is understood as accumulated physiological stagnation, sluggish lymphatic drainage, dampened adrenal response, gastrointestinal heaviness, then the Kambo peptide mixture acts on precisely the systems implicated in producing such a state. 2 languages, 1 body. Fact 94. The Amazon basin isn't merely a large forest. It's the largest continuous tropical ecosystem on Earth, covering approximately 5.5 million square kilometers across 9 countries. It contains roughly 1/5 of all freshwater on the planet's surface and generates about 20% of the world's oxygen through photosynthesis. The pharmacological wealth of the Amazon can't be separated from its hydrological and atmospheric function. They're aspects of the same living system. Fact 95. The ayahuasca vine itself can grow to extraordinary size. Mature specimens in old-growth forest may reach 30 meters in length, climbing through the canopy by wrapping around host trees. The vine requires decades to develop the bark thickness from which ceremonial preparations are made. Overharvesting for the growing global ayahuasca tourism market, concentrated around Iquitos and the Sacred Valley in Peru, is a documented concern. The plant that makes the brew possible is slow-growing and long-lived. It can't be rushed. Fact 96. Psychotria viridis, the DMT-containing chacruna leaf, grows naturally as an understory shrub throughout the basin, producing small red berries and dark green ovate leaves. The concentration of DMT in the leaves varies with plant age, season, time of day, and soil chemistry. Experienced healers account for these variations empirically, adjusting the ratio of leaf to vine based on knowledge accumulated over years of brewing. Every batch is calibrated by hand, by eye, by taste. Fact 97. The Shipibo people number approximately 35,000 to 45,000 individuals living along the Ucayali River and its tributaries. Their language belongs to the Panon family. They're internationally known for their Kene textile art, which has been exhibited at the Quai Branly Museum in Paris and the Sainsbury Center in Norwich. They've also become centers of what's sometimes called ayahuasca tourism, a global phenomenon that has created both economic opportunity and real cultural disruption within Shipibo communities. The attention of the world isn't always a gift. Fact 98. The traditional Amazonian Dieta has been proposed as a potential adjunct to Western psychedelic-assisted therapy. Researchers, including Berlovitz and colleagues, have argued that the Dieta frame, the dietary restriction, solitude, sustained plant ingestion, creates a neurobiological and psychological context that may be as therapeutically significant as the pharmacological content of the medicines themselves. The prolonged alteration of the neurochemical environment through diet and behavior may prime the nervous system for the kind of restructuring that psychedelic-assisted therapy aims to achieve. The container may matter as much as the contents. Fact 99. Ecological research consistently confirms what indigenous Amazonian healers have maintained for generations. The forest contains pharmacologically active compounds distributed across thousands of species, most of which have never been studied in a laboratory. Of the approximately 40,000 plant species in the Amazon, only a small fraction have been analyzed for their phytochemical content. Every species that disappears before it has been studied takes its biochemistry with it, permanently. Fact 100. Of the plant species in the Amazon that have been analyzed, many have yielded clinically relevant compounds. Anti-cancer agents, antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, cardiovascular drugs. The ethnobotanical knowledge that directed researchers to these compounds came, in almost every case, from an Amazonian healer or community that had already identified the plant's medicinal use generations before. The forest is still speaking. The question is whether anyone is listening carefully enough. Beneath the canopy of the Amazon, a library older than any written language continues to grow. Each plant holds a small piece of information about the chemistry of the forest floor, about the cycles of rain and dry season, about the slow accumulation of observation across generations. The human tongue recoils from bitterness, a reflex wired deep into the brainstem, and yet, for thousands of years, people have chosen to drink the bitter brew, to sit with the discomfort, to listen for whatever the plant might teach. That choice to move toward difficulty rather than away from it may be one of the oldest forms of courage. Tonight, somewhere along a river whose name appears on no commercial map, the rain is falling on leaves that have no Latin binomial. A frog is calling from a branch. Someone is listening. And the forest, as it has for millennia, is slowly teaching anyone patient enough to sit still. Thank you for listening tonight. Sleep well and let the rain fall gently on the canopy above you.